Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Megan, and I am the manager of Two Bright Lights. And I'm honored today to be sharing this webinar with Leah from ColourPop Events and Jen from Catalyst Web Company. So honestly, this is going to be a great event today. Leah is a pro. She's actually spoken with us before about style shoots, and now she's here to talk all about building a portfolio. So she has a lot to say on that subject today, so I'm so excited to have her here. But before we kick that off, I wanted to hand things over to Jen to tell you a little bit more about Catalyst and give you a little bit more intro for the day.
So hi, everybody. I am Jen Smacco. I'm the creative director at Catalyst Wedding Co. So we run a print and online magazine that is dedicated to bringing more diverse representation into wedding media and to really help vendors across the industry to have the tools that they need to really serve underrepresented clientele. And so that means people of color, it means different people with different cultural backgrounds, people in the LGBTQ community. So we have loved working with Leah. We've worked with Leah on so many different projects. And we've been working with Two Bright Lights to bring you guys a series of webinars that really focus in on our mission to help vendors have the tools they need to do their job. So I'm just here to give a brief introduction before we hand it off to Leah and to tell you quickly about Unconvention, which is a conference that we run basically to dive deeper into these topics for wedding professionals. So our Unconvention conference is coming up on Sunday, November 5th in Richmond, Virginia. And if you want to know more about that, you can go to unconventionconf.com. And with that, I'll hand it off to Leah.
All right, thanks, Jen. First, huge thank you to Megan from Two Bright Lights and Jen from Catalyst for having me here today. Super honored to be here. As Megan mentioned, my company is ColourPop Events. I'm a wedding planner based here in New York City, and I've had my company for about 5 years. So I'm going into my 5th year of business. So let's go ahead and get started with the webinar. All right, so today's topic is building a diverse and LGBTQ+ friendly portfolio as a creative. And you can, yeah, there I am. Hi, everybody. Okay, so here's the question. The overarching question is, what is the challenge? So the challenge is presenting a diverse and inclusive portfolio when your real weddings may not be so diverse. I totally understand it can be frustrating when the photos that we have access to from real weddings don't necessarily reflect the values of our brand or exactly the target market that we want to work with. This is a challenge that I've definitely faced myself and analyzed, and I've made a conscious effort to diversify my own portfolio on my website, social media, marketing materials. So everything that I'm talking about today is something that I speak from experience. So I just want to let everybody know that. I also want to stress how important this issue is of having a diverse and inclusive portfolio. It's important because people notice. It's something people pay attention to. Diversity is something that people are looking for these days. And one kind of great example of this is we just wrapped up New York Bridal Fashion Week here in New York City. And there was a pretty well-known dress designer who had a runway show and did not use any models of color in the show. And I can tell you that there were a ton of people who posted about that show on Instagram and in Instagram stories. And almost all of the comments were, there's no models of color. People were kind of shocked and surprised, especially in this day and age, that that would be something that this dress designer wasn't aware of. So to have people pointing that out, that's not great for the brand and honestly could result in vendors not recommending that particular designer. So people are paying attention, people are noticing. So this is definitely a really important issue that we should focus on. So why do we as creatives have this challenge? For most people in the wedding industry, we do a limited number of events per year. So just for pure volume purposes, we have less opportunity to work with a lot of different people. This is particularly the case when you're starting out. And if you've maybe only done 1 or 2 weddings, then the images that you have could very well be of just 2 straight white couples. And so you might find yourself in a place of, okay, if that's the work that I've done, how do I present something a little bit more diverse? And one of the reasons why I also wanted to talk about why we have this challenge is to make people feel like they're not alone, because they might be looking at the work that they've done and kind of feel that it doesn't represent what they're striving for. And so I just want to make people feel like, okay, this is a problem that a lot of people have. One of the things that I'll note is that for photographers, I'm not dissing on photographers or saying that they have it easy, but they do have more opportunity to shoot more couples and more individuals. So they're able to do things like an engagement shoot, an anniversary shoot, maternity shoots, family shoots, in-home photos, which gives them an opportunity to work with a lot more people. They're able to actively seek out people to photograph, and that's not necessarily the case for like planners and, you know, maybe companies that are doing accessories and everything. But I will say that photographers, even though they have more opportunity, they're still totally putting the work in to make that happen and put the effort in. So before getting into the details of how to create a more diverse portfolio, I just want to remind everybody listening today that diversity is not just a box to check. Brittany Taylor, who's a makeup artist in North Carolina, who has a column for Catalyst, actually blogged over the summer about a really great piece about making sure that you're seeking diversity for the right reasons, that it shouldn't just be about having a piece for your portfolio. It should be part of an ongoing effort on your part and your company's part to promote diversity, fight against racism, and promote LGBTQ rights. And also, as I'll touch on later, I don't want people going into this thinking that creating a diverse portfolio is going to bring in more clients, bring in more revenue. It certainly might, and it also certainly might not. So I just want everybody to kind of keep in mind that money should not be the driving factor as to why you're doing this. You should be doing it to show what you and your company value and stand for. All right, so now what everybody's been waiting for, what are the practical steps that we can take to make our portfolios more diverse? So the first thing is, and the easiest thing is to actually ask for the photos from real weddings. You know, I get it from a photographer's perspective, their number one priority is delivering photos to their couples. You know, they're not always thinking about making sure that the galleries get sent out to planners or particularly other vendors that are involved. So I say put the onus on yourself to make sure that you're the one asking for photos. If you're not a planner, then you may not feel totally comfortable approaching the photographer. So just ask the planner, ping that person to make sure, see if they can get the photos for you. What I do myself is I keep a running list of the weddings that I've done and what images I've yet to get. And so I know, like, after maybe, 2 or 3 months after the wedding, I've got a calendar reminder to ping the photographer just to check in on the photos. And one of the things I want to remind everybody to do is to be a good vendor in return. So when you do get the photos from the photographer and if you're using them on your website or social media, I can't stress enough to make sure that you're crediting the photographer and also all of the other vendors involved. And if you do send out the gallery to, if you're a planner and you send out the gallery to the other vendors on the team, one of the things that I do is put together like a cheat sheet list of all the vendors with their vendor credits, website, and maybe Instagram handle. And I also remind everybody, make sure that you're always tagging the photographer and also never to edit the photographer's photos, which means no filters. It's about preserving, all of this is also part about preserving the vendor relationship. So make sure you're doing right by the photographer. So if you're a planner, you can tell photographers what you need and why. And obviously you need to be doing this like in a courteous way. So one of the things that you can do when you've got a real wedding with a couple that you know is going to be great for your portfolio, you can create a small shot list of some of the images that you definitely want to make sure the photographer captures. And when approaching the photographer, you want to make sure it feels like a collaborative process, like you're letting them into the reasoning for why you want to do this, because you want to build your portfolio, you want to make it more diverse, you want to promote LGBTQ couples. And I feel like being genuine and honest with the photographers about why you want the photos will make them more amenable to helping you out and, to making sure that you get particular photos on the day of. For example, one of the things that you can ask the photographer for is detail shots that have some people in them, so that not only is the photographer shooting a bouquet, but for example, they're shooting it with a bride of color holding the bouquet, or they've got a groom of color holding the rings, or if you're doing a cake cutting shot, you can show, two women cutting the cake, things like that. The other really great and kind of easy to diversify your portfolio is to do a style shoot. So Megan referenced that I've done a webinar for Two Bright Lights before, and that one was all on style shoots, which I've done a ton of over the last 4 years. So I definitely think that doing a style shoot is quite possibly the best way to diversify your portfolio and have creative control over the images that get captured. So when thinking about putting together a styled shoot, one of the things that I ask people to keep in mind is that equally as important as having models of color in front of the camera or LGBTQ couple in front of the camera, it's having a diverse team of people behind the camera. So while you may not see and won't see the vendor team in photos, I feel like people are going to notice if you have an all-white vendor team working on a photo shoot with models of color or LGBTQ couple. So in doing the styled shoots, obviously casting of the models is the kind of critical thing here. So when doing a model call, it's perfectly acceptable to put out a model request for people of color or an LGBTQ couple. I think people expect that and appreciate it, and it's just an easy way to make sure that you're getting the people that you want to fulfill what you want to accomplish with the style shoot. One of my words of caution is please do not cast 2 straight women or 2 straight men as a lesbian or gay couple. Number one, it's going to be pretty obvious that the 2 people don't have any kind of chemistry, and so your shoot, it's just going to look fake. It's not going to look like a real couple. I've definitely seen some images where you can tell it's not a real couple and you can spot it a mile away. Number 2, doing that is also pretty insulting to the LGBTQ community. You can definitely find a real couple. It might take some time and some digging to find one, but you can do it, and you really should. One of my favorite stories about casting models is, if you come with a genuine purpose and like true intent, people are going to be more generous than you can imagine and really into what you're doing. So I always love telling the story about the Barbie and Kendra shoot that I produced, because literally I got a couple to fly from LA to do this crazy pink and like dreamy Barbie and Kendra shoot for me. So the way it happened was I was working on that shoot with Kate from H&H Weddings, and we were trying to find a couple to model for us. And like I had gone into it wanting to have like a lesbian couple, so do like the lesbian take on Barbie and Ken, which we turned Barbie and Kendra. And we were on Instagram looking at people, and we came across an Instagram profile for Madden and kind of went down the Instagram rabbit hole, did some digging, and found out that Madden was married in a relationship, and Madden and their partner Sabine were just like perfect. It was everything we could have hoped for. So I think we either messaged them on Instagram or sent an email. They responded. We did a Skype call, and I had to be like, hey, this is going to sound really weird, but I'd love to have the 2 of you come out to New York City and model for this Barbie and Kendra shoot that I'm putting together. And they were totally into it. And flew all the way across the country to participate. And it's one of my favorite shoots that I've done. It's some of the most amazing images that I've collected. And so, don't be scared. If you're doing things for the right reason, people are going to see that. They're going to understand your purpose, and they're going to be more willing to help you out. The other tip that I have when trying to cast models is look around at some of your vendor friends who may have had couples that they've done weddings for previously that might be perfect for your shoot, and have them reach out to those couples and see if they might want to model for you. I can say personally, I've had one of my past couples model for a styled shoot for me. So it happens. People kind of love to get dressed up and, have hair and makeup done and get nice clothes for the day. So definitely don't count that out. Also with styled shoots, I would say, you know, there's nothing wrong with turning down an opportunity if you feel like the shoot and the concept proposed is not offering something new or is just not making an effort to further diversity. You know, I know people get a lot of inquiries to participate in styled shoots, and it's a lot of time and it's a lot of money. And so people can be discerning in what they want to work on and what they don't. So I feel like I encourage everybody to kind of take a look at what you're participating in and to make sure that it's really meaningful to you. So similar to what I had mentioned with the real weddings is thinking about getting these detailed photos with people in them. So approach it kind of like you're creating this arsenal of stock photos that you can use in the future. So like I said, a person holding a bouquet, somebody holding rings, somebody holding an invite, a cake topper, two people cutting the cake. It's a great way to kind of have, even though it is wedding related, it's not as wedding related as having like a photo of a couple in their wedding day attire. And it's something that you can kind of just use on your website and in marketing materials and social media. So, you know, in advance of the shoot, kind of think about what shots you can get and what shots you can have the photographer get, and just create a list of that to make sure that you're capturing all of that. One of the benefits of styled shoots is also great for a particular type of vendor, like companies who make attire or accessories, stationery designers, party supply companies. Styled shoots give those types of vendors a great way to accumulate a lot of images without a ton of effort, meaning that they can just send their product anywhere in the country and don't have to be physically present for a photo shoot. And a lot of times, really, the only out-of-pocket cost for that is shipping. So I encourage those vendors to really try to get out there, try to get your products and shoots, and really get a lot of great images that you can use on your site. And then also with styled shoots, there's one great idea is to use LGBTQ props. So things like a Mr. and Mr. Cake Topper, or a Mrs. and Mrs. Napkin, or like a Love is Love drink stirrer. They're things that are easy to photograph. Again, you can kind of treat them kind of like stock images that you have and can just throw up on social media when you may not have like a really planned out post to do that day. And I do want to mention that in addition to using titles like Mr., Mrs., and Miss, one of the new titles that I've seen is for gender non-conforming individuals is the use of MX. So I just want to make sure everybody knows about that and that that's kind of a consideration these days too. So also with the props, one of the things that makes it kind of an easy thing is that it's items that a vendor can photograph themselves and use for content on their website and social media, and you don't have to go through a whole production of a styled shoot to get those images. And in keeping with this idea, one of the things that I suggest in order to make your website and your social media feeds and everything feel inclusive is staying away from a lot of Mr. and Mrs. images and language and like bride and groom language. So obviously if you've done a straight wedding, in a gallery of those photos, you might have like a Mrs. and Mrs. Cake Topper, chair signs or something like that. But I don't suggest that you take that image and use it as like a lead image on any of your website pages, because you want to be conscious of what people are looking at. And a lot of time people just quickly scroll through things and look at photos. And so you want to be creating the best and most inclusive impression in that like first few seconds that you get to make that first impression. So another way to make sure that we are making our portfolios more diverse is to tell people what you want. I'm a big proponent of just like putting it out into the universe, what you want to do and what you want to accomplish. So telling all of your vendor friends what kind of couples you want to be working with is really important. Just similarly to like how I tell people, oh, I really want to work at this venue. I can say, oh, I'm really looking to create a more diverse portfolio, or, oh, I've not worked with an LGBTQ couple before. So telling people that, then they can keep you in mind. If they happen to book a couple that would be a good fit for you, then they can give you that referral. And like I said before, with my story of models flying across the country, like people are going to be more generous and receptive and open than you could ever imagine. So just kind of put yourself out there, and I think you'll get a great return on that. So in addition, I know we're talking about making our portfolios look diverse visually. I also just wanted to take a minute to talk about the fact that it's not just about the photos, but it's also about the language that you use on your website and social media and marketing materials that we need to be conscious of. So language is a great way to show inclusivity. And there's a few simple sort of switches and language, like keywords, that I want people to be aware of. So when talking generally, you want to avoid the words bride and groom and consider using terms like couples or partners or spouses. And this also applies to contracts. As a wedding planner, I take a look at everybody's, like all of the different vendor contracts, and I can't tell you how many times people are still sending out contracts or questionnaires that say bride and groom. And I've even, yeah, it can get a little sticky sometimes. So it's just something for people to be aware of. The other switch is don't call it a bridal party, call it a wedding party. I will say that, like, you could say wedding party to a couple and they won't get it at first. So you may have to explain, but I still like, that's the best term to use. And then also don't call it a bridal suite, call it just a suite, getting ready room, something like that. And one of the other issues that you may come across once you start doing weddings with more diverse couples is you may run into somebody that doesn't want you to use their photos publicly for whatever reason. I had a lesbian couple who initially didn't want me using their wedding photos. And what I did in that situation was just wrote them a really nice email back. And I said, hey, it's really important for me to show that I've worked with LGBTQ couples. I want to, be more attractive to couples like you, to show everybody that I am inclusive and working with couples and that it's super important for me. So I tried to work out a compromise with them and ways to use their photos, but still sort of protecting their privacy. And we came up with a great compromise of being able to use photos as long as their faces weren't shown. So I was still able to get a photo of a cake that had two brides with their dog, which was adorable, cake topper. I was able to use like a long shot of the ceremony so that you could see two brides up there, but it just wasn't super up close. There's one particularly great photo that I know got regrammed on the Knots Instagram, which is the two of them like with their backs facing the city and like their bouquets raised. And it was just really great. So, if somebody doesn't want you to use their photos, I think there's definitely ways to compromise and to also, but again, just tell them exactly kind of why you want to use the photos and just be really genuine and honest about that. So the last thing that I just want to touch on is a few final thoughts. So the first one is that people are going to notice. As I mentioned earlier, people are paying attention to this. Couples notice, vendors notice. And sometimes I honestly think it's not more important, but it's equally as important to be attractive to couples as it is to be attractive to other vendors, because vendors have a lot of power in referring other vendors, and they want to make sure that they're referring people who share similar values and beliefs and ideals and initiatives as they are. And in terms of people noticing, earlier this year, I received an email from an LGBTQ couple who said that it was refreshing to see photos of other queer couples on my website, and that ultimately was one of the factors that contributed to them hiring me. And I have to say that moment was absolutely incredible. Like, I've put in time and been thoughtful about making sure that my website and my social media is really inclusive and as diverse as I can make it. And so to see that people are actually noticing is a pretty incredible feeling. So I also want to make sure people set realistic expectations for what this work is going to do. Be prepared to forfeit some likes on social media in order to make your feed more diverse. In looking at my own Instagram analytics, I can tell you that a photo of a couple, regardless of whether, straight couple, gay couple, white couple, people of color, photos of couples are rarely going to get as many likes as a photo of a beautiful cake or an amazing bouquet. Like, that's just kind of what people gravitate towards. And I know a lot of people are big on curating their feed and maximizing the likes. But for me, it was more important to, for example, have a photo of two grooms in my feed than just be maxing out the likes on my photos. Also, just because you have a diverse portfolio doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to attract a diverse client base, which is okay. I mean, it goes back to what I said earlier. This isn't about money. So you may not see more clients generally, you may not see more diverse clientele, but regardless, it is worth the effort to show that you're inclusive and care about promoting diversity. I feel like it definitely speaks volumes about what you and your company stand for and about what's important to you. So that's all I've got.
Awesome.
I think we're going to jump into the Q&A section now.
Yes. All right. So turn the camera bigger. Great. Okay. So I know we will give it a couple minutes for some more questions to come in. But I actually have some questions for you, and I'm sure Jen has some questions too. So
yes, I do.
Chime in as ever we need one. But so one of the things that you mentioned in the beginning, and obviously this is talking a lot about having a visually diverse portfolio. So I'm sure there are many people who don't exactly know how to approach a photographer, how to go about making sure they get the photos that they need, especially if they've never worked with this photographer before. And then all of a sudden you're after the event and you don't even know if they captured what you needed them to capture. So how would you suggest sort of like playing that out?
Yeah, I think there's a few ways to do it. And I actually kind of ran into this issue on one of the weddings that I had where a couple had hired a photographer who was a friend and had wedding experience, but maybe not a ton of wedding experience. So there's a couple of ways to do it. One, I think sort of the initial way to approach it is to look at their website and see what photos they're showing and whether they're good at getting those detail photos or not. Because if it's just all people shots, then I feel like then you have the knowledge, you're armed with the information to be able to approach them and say, hey, you know, there's a lot of really great details at this wedding. I want to make sure that you or your second shooter are able to capture them. Would it be helpful for me to put a shot list together? I think it's just all about the way that you approach it. Like, you don't want to insult the photographer, but you know, these images are sort of our currency. Like, if you've got a great wedding and the photos don't turn out, then you're not even able to show anybody like this amazing thing that happened. So I think there's a really great way to be professional and courteous and approach the photographer about that without really stepping on their toes.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. And I think also, as much as you can include why you want them and like how you're planning to use them and the fact that you'll be helping to promote their brand as well. One would think they'd usually go for it.
Yeah, I mean, so just to be completely honest, what happened in this situation was I told the photographer, I said, there's a lot of amazing details. I think this wedding is going to be really perfect for publication opportunities. You know, how comfortable are you with the details? And she was honest and said, you know, I don't necessarily do a ton. And I was kind of putting a list together for her. And she said, you know, it would be great if I could bring on an assistant who could help me kind of while she was doing like cocktail hour stuff and send the second shooter down to like do the detail photos. And I asked her how much the assistant would cost, and it was like $200. And so I approached the bride and honestly said, like, I split the cost of the assistant with her because I have as much interest in getting great photos as the bride does. And I didn't think, you know, that it was fair for me to just approach the bride and be like, hey, can you shell out an additional $200 when even though she wanted the wedding published herself, it's still kind of like a mutual thing. So I felt like that was something that I could do to like show some good faith.
Yeah. So I have another question, and Jen, I think you probably have some to chime in on this one as well.
Yeah.
So obviously, being in New York, we are in a very fortunate situation where we're in this bubble where there's many people who share the same ideals and same goals. How would you suggest, or do you have any recommendations for people who may feel like they're in an area where they're the only people that have these goals?
Yeah.
How do you find other people who are like-minded and so you can go out and build portfolios together?
I think that's a great question because I know a lot of people do feel like that. Like if you're in a teeny tiny small town, you might feel pretty alone and isolated. I think the message that I can say to those people is that there are like-minded people out there. It just might take a little bit of effort to find them, but that's what's so amazing about social media like Facebook and Instagram. So there's so many Facebook groups out there. I feel like that people can network in order to find like their go-to people. And also Instagram is wonderful. I mean, I really do. Like, I've met some of my closest friends on Instagram, and it sounds crazy to like think about that, but that's kind of how the world works. But also too, even if you do end up thinking that you can't really find anybody locally, then reach out to somebody outside of your city. And if you can financially make it happen, travel, get them to travel to you. Like I said, people want to work together and do good work. And so people are really incentivized to like kind of make it happen.
Yeah, that's great. And Jen, I know you are not based in New York. So do you have anything that you want to share off of that?
Yeah, so I am based in Charlottesville, Virginia, which is a big wedding town, but is also a very traditional wedding town. And so there are not a lot of diverse couples or not a lot of LGBTQ weddings that get featured in main media here. But like Leah said, that doesn't mean that they don't exist. There are people of every walk of life in every town in this country. So everybody falls in love and everybody gets married, and they need people who are willing to work with them and are to showcase their love in the best way possible. So I think Leah's right. Finding vendors through Facebook or Instagram is a great way, but also just talking to venues, because a lot of venues will be kind of, they'll work with all different types of people, even people who maybe couldn't find a planner or couldn't afford a planner. And those venues can really connect you with couples and other vendors like maybe you wouldn't have found on your own. So I'm always a big fan of working with venues that share the same values as you and to get on their short list, because even if a couple doesn't think that they need a planner or need a coordinator, if the venue can refer you to those people and know like, okay, we have an LGBTQ couple coming to this venue, they really want to get married here, here is the coordinator that I'm going to send them to. So that's a great way to kind of get connected.
Yeah, relationships with venues are often key, because when couples go into the process, if they're not working with a planner and just they kind of are overwhelmed and have no idea what they're doing, the venue is obviously the first thing that they book. And so a lot of times if they don't have another professional that they can use for guidance, they'll say to the venue, hey, who do you recommend for planning or photography or videography or florals? And so having good relationships with venues that are like-minded and also fit with your aesthetic and everything is really key.
That's a good point. Okay, so you talked a little bit about putting things out in the universe,
yes.
And I love that. I think that's fantastic. So what is some phrasing that you would suggest to use if somebody wants to put something on their website that they want to work with more LGBT couples or more diverse couples? How can you say that in the right way?
Yeah, I don't know that with your website, I think you can speak through photos
yes.
and images. And then I think on social media is where you can make it more of a, direct thing. Mm-hmm. So you can say, hey, everybody, we're booking 2018 weddings, would love to work with more LGBTQ couples or more people of color. So if you're interested, we would love to work with you, and please reach out. You can also tell other vendor friends that, you might find like if you're dying to work, again, it can be anything. Like if you're dying to work at a venue or with a particular vendor or with a particular couple, we can all play around with our pricing a little bit. And you can even say to your friends, hey, if you've got this amazing couple, but they may not be able to afford a planner, let me at least talk to them and see if we can work something out. Sure. Makes sense.
Jen,
Yeah, and I think,
or if you want to add something to that as well.
Yeah, well, I know we always encourage photos are, as Leah said, the best way, because a lot of couples won't hire someone unless they can see proof that you've worked with couples like them before. But definitely always encourage people to include something on their about page about their values and their beliefs, because people are definitely going to look at your about page before they book you because they want to get to know you. So don't be afraid to just say, I am an LGBTQ plus friendly business. And I believe that love is love. And that little statement will go a long way.
That's a great point. And the about section, putting your
That is,
ideals,
yeah.
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I have a question for you, Leah. So I know that in the past you've had some styled shoots that you've worked on where maybe not all of the vendors were kind of as up to speed on how to work with LGBTQ couples as you are. So especially if you are coordinating a styled shoot where everyone's goal is to, get more photos that can appeal and show their support, but maybe that some people aren't as educated in the issues. How would you go about making sure that, nobody's getting alienated in the course of a styled shoot?
Yeah, one of the things, I think the best way to approach that, so depending on the models that you're working with, I think it's totally appropriate to ask the models what their pronouns are in terms of whether it's he, his, yeah, I think he, she, her, and hers, they, their, and theirs. Totally appropriate to ask, what their pronouns are. And then it is also suggested I email the entire vendor team and kind of let them know. So Sabine and Madden, who I'm going to be working with again in November, Madden's pronouns are they, their, and theirs. And so I totally intend on shooting an email out to all of the vendor team to let them know that, because I know one of the things Madden is going to be speaking on when Madden's here is on experiences of how to work with LGBTQ and gender non-conforming vendors and also clients to share their experiences with this. So telling people what they can expect and what people are comfortable with and how to make sure everybody's comfortable. And then if you notice something happening on the day of, as politely and as discreetly as possible, just, pull them aside and remind them, hey, Madden's pronouns are they, their, and theirs. We need to be respectful of that.
Thanks. Awesome. That's great advice. Anybody else have any questions?
Well, I could not let you leave without asking a style shoot question, because you are the guru.
I am. I'm the self-proclaimed queen of
yes. Okay. So if you get approached by somebody who's planning a style shoot, how do you find out more information without committing to things? Because a lot of times people don't want to give away their secrets fully without you being on board.
Right.
So how would you suggest sort of navigating that?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to say is you kind of start off by saying, hey, either I've done a lot of shoots in the past, or like I have a limited marketing budget. I'm just saying this is going on. I want to be particular about the style of shoots that I work on, or if I'm busy and I want to make sure that I'm using my time the best way. There's definitely, you can phrase it a little, you can set that tone and then say, so since I'm, being a little more selective, I'd love to hear more about the shoot. And do you have models picked out? And what vendors are you working with? What's the concept? So I think there's easy ways to say that people can, we all spend a lot of money and time on these things. So I feel like people can appreciate that not everybody's going to be able to jump in right away, and understand and appreciate that people want a little bit more information before they kind of make a decision.
Okay, one more question. Okay. So obviously you are a self-proclaimed Instagram stalker when it comes to finding couples. How do you do it without being creepy? When you are approaching people?
I know I still feel like sometimes it can come off as weird. It really totally depends on the couple, I feel like, or the person. If you're looking at their feed, I feel like you can get a certain vibe from them about whether if you feel like they're a very private person, then chances are it's probably not the best person for you to reach out to. But with Madden and Sabine, Madden has a nonprofit company called Project Q, and Sabine had an online vintage store and was doing a lot in the LGBTQ community in Los Angeles. So they definitely, you got the vibe from them that they would be open to doing something that would kind of promote them and their causes and everything a little bit more. So it's a judgment thing. And then you can also always do that whole sort of hey, I know this is weird, but I'd love to have you kind of you know, just kind of like phrase it that way
Yeah.
so that you're kind of totally admitting that it's weird and that you're stalking people. But also I feel like the reverse happens and clients stalk us as vendors.
That's true.
Because I've had people like refer to things that they had to have gone really deep in my Instagram feed to find out that like I liked this particular thing. And so it's just this bizarre world that we're living in where like we know a lot about people, people know a lot about us before you even hop on the phone.
Like that time you run into somebody from high school and they tell you something and you already know, but you have to act surprised.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah. Or when you see people from high school, like, are watching your Instagram stories, you're like, I've not talked to you in forever.
Yeah. So it's creepy everywhere.
It is creepy everywhere, but that's kind of, I mean, like, you've accepted it. That's the world we're in.
It's true. Okay. So I actually have another question for you.
Okay.
So you talk about diversity not being a checklist item.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are afraid of it seeming like you're tokenizing people of color or the LGBTQ community. Do you have any recommendations how to avoid the tokenization?
I think, like I mentioned, it has to be part of a larger effort. So, you know, obviously when you're starting out and you're building your portfolio, you may only have one couple of color on your website. But I think people will see that you are a newer company and understand that. Now, if you're a company that's been around 10 years and you have only one couple of color, I feel like that's a pretty obvious thing. Or, you know, you have nothing on your website and then all of a sudden after like 5-6 years, you're doing a style shoot. You know, it has to be part of like a more organic and really genuine effort. And I think it's going to be easy to spot like who's doing it just to kind of cover their bases versus people who are doing it as part of like a larger initiative.
Great. Well, I think that is it for us for today. So as you all know now, since Leah is an Instagram stalker, you should all stalk her on Instagram at ColourPop Events. I personally stalk her and it's great. So
and a really cute dog and cat. So if you're into dog and cat pictures, tune in.
Yes. So definitely follow Leah. If you have any additional questions, you can reach out to us and we will find a way of connecting you. And thank you again so much for being with us today. Jen, I'd pass it over to you if you have any other final words.
Yeah, I would say thank you so much, Leah. You are always a huge help to Catalyst. Leah also, because she is the style shoot guru, we run a style shoot competition called the Out of the Box Challenge, where we sent a bunch of teams props that Leah compiled and got all together. And basically she ran that entire program and got a whole set of really amazing styled shoots out of that she was the curator for. So cannot speak highly enough of Leah and the work that she does. So, and she didn't say this, but her Barbie and Kendra shoot got published everywhere. So Rock and Roll Bride and all over the place. So if you do the work and you create these beautiful images that showcase diverse couples, people are going to notice because it's so different than the same style of images we see over and over again. So good things will happen when you follow Leah's advice.
Yes. Yes, and as you can see in the chat, Leah has quite the fan club. So
I know. Everybody.
Yeah, so if you are not already part of that, you should be. And we will all see you very soon.
All right.
Yeah,
cool.
Awesome.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye.